Bantamweight squaring off on short notice at T-Mobile Arena this weekend. We have a known commodity, a guy that fought on The Ultimate Fighter Season 24 after Brandon Moreno and Alessandro Pantoja in the first episode in on short notice. It's Terrence Mitchell, the former Alaska FC champ. He was on Dana White's Looking for a Fight. Was it his fault that Nick the Tooth got kicked off that show? Probably not, but it was that show where Matt Serra and Nick the Tooth get into that grappling exchange. So if you look at it for Terrence Mitchell, he gets this opportunity replacing Christian Rodriguez on a few weeks' notice. And if you look at it for Cameron Saaiman, I mean, the nickname, it's MSP. It's safely described on UFC.com as the most savage player, but one commenter on our last Saaiman video described in great detail what that nickname actually means in Afrikaans, and it's not meant for television. Wow. So if you consider for Cameron Saaiman, what do I know about him? Well, when he was on the regional scene, he was very, very good. And he comes out of Team CIT with Dricus du Plessis. He's fighting Robert Whittaker on this card. But if you consider for the much younger Cameron Saaiman at just 22, he's in a class of prospects that I have a hard time defining. So I wrote down a few examples that I have of guys like Cameron Saaiman in the UFC. Fire! Francis Marshall. Just picked up his first loss, but Francis Marshall. Jake Hadley, also an EFC vet, just like one Cameron Saaiman, as well as Melzik Bogdasarian. And Bogdasarian doesn't get it done like those other men, but those guys, they all have shiny records. They're all very, very good at what they do, but they all struggle in certain other areas. And for Cameron Saaiman, he is 2-0 in the UFC. He's withstood a ton of adversity in those two fights, and his fingers, knees, and toes have been magnets for illegal shots. I mean, he lost a point against Steven Kozlo. Illegal knee to the head. They let Kozlo continue in that fight. That ends up being to his detriment, and you have Saaiman getting the win. His last time out there, he lands at the end of the fight. It's an eye poke. He ends up losing a point in that one as well. So for Cameron Saaiman, that's the reason behind his majority decision win his last time out. But the also, poor guy's got to stop just getting those fouls out there.
He does. That has been a really big issue for him. I don't disagree with you whatsoever. But he's in a class of prospect that I also have a hard time with, and this is why. He has a pretty good foundation to his game right now, and if he maintains his skill set, I do think he's going to be able to continue to get wins. But I'm curious to see what one skill he is going to try to branch out with and really try to specialize.
This is why I don't think he will, because he started kickboxing at 12, but if you look at his MMA record, he kicked off his amateur career at 14. So I think he's going to be one of those hybrid, new age, good at everything. Wrestling's the hallmark, but what you see is kind of what you get out of Saaiman. But again, he's only 22, so he's probably going to refine a few things.
Well, the other thing about that, too, is when we see fighters like that, the defense normally comes with a lot of experience. And for Cameron Saaiman, you bring it up, the record might be very nice. He is 8-0 now, but he has faced a lot of adversity, especially on the feet. He's one of these strikers who Teddy Atlas says it best. When he makes a purchase, you know what he does? He sticks around for the receipt. He doesn't say, no, thank you, I'm all good. And that's been a big issue for him because he'll get into the pocket. He has very nice straight shots. He has good combinations. The knees are really good, too. I like those as a deterrent for his opponent's takedown attempts, but the problem is, if you are like a Chad Mendes type striker, and I know those types of fighters don't come around all that often, but if there is a fighter out there who's going to be able to really threaten his takedown defense and then force him to eat strikes as a result, I just don't know if his style's one. I just think a fighter like that's going to take him a couple years to build towards, because you're right, if he does maintain his well-roundedness, and I do think it'll be an asset in the future, it's going to take him a little while, I do think, to really become a full-fledged prospect, because at only 22 years of age, I do like where he's at right now, but I think he's got a little ways to grow, because at 135, we talk about it. Is bantamweight the best division in the UFC? Arguably so, and it's a really deep one too. So for Cameron Saaiman, if you guys have watched any of our videos, you know I have been quite high on him in the past, but I think the Mana Martinez fight, maybe Mana losing his fight after the UFC is maybe clouding my judgment a little bit, but Mana was able to land some good strikes. Like, he was in that fight for a little bit.
No, he wasn't. The scores in that fight, 29-26, 28-28, 28-27. Saaiman loses a point due to 2 cup checks, and then in the third round, he lands the eye poke. He does not lose a point for the eye poke, but he does lose a point for the cup checks. And in the third round, you had 2 judges, Matt.
Oh, he was dominant in the third.
Adelaide Bird and Chris Lee scored that one 10-8 in the third round. Good cards there. But for Cameron Saaiman, what do we know? Again, that Joshua and Kim fight, he did get touched up in the first round. He rallied in the second. In the third, he gets the finish. He tends to build as these fights go along, and he forces that pressure onto his opponents. And when you look at a guy like Terrence Mitchell, who came in to the Ultimate Fighter, 7-fight win streak, Dana White's looking for a fight. And from looking for a fight, then he ends up on the show. And that was Tournament of Champions. Everybody was a champ from a regional organization. So Terrence Mitchell in that fight gets to take on the Australian Kai France. Now, on Facebook, 2.9 million views. On YouTube, from a random account with just the highlight, 5.3 million views of Terrence Mitchell mean mugging and putting his fist in Kai France's face in the face-off, only for Terrence Mitchell to get absolutely bodied in 30 seconds. And if you go back and watch that fight, it's just 2 overhand rights that wobble him the first time. Then it's an overhand left that drops him. Then Terrence Mitchell gets right back up, overhand right. Good night, Irene, as Michael Chiavello would say. I don't know if he has that trademark, so we got to throw that out there. But Terrence Mitchell, he loses that fight on the Ultimate Fighter in 2016. Now, people are going to say in the co-main event, well, Moreno and Pantoja, that's not a real 2-0, brother, because that one fight was just an exhibition fight. I watched Terrence Mitchell get knocked out, and so did millions of other people. So he took about a year and a half layoff. So 2016 to 2018, he gets a win in 2018, then he takes another long layoff until 2020, and he's been active of late. But when you're fighting in Alaska in the lower weight classes, or in general, there's very few Jared Cannoniers, Justin Buchholz. There's a lot more Victor Rodriguez that we saw fight against Adrian Yanez. Terrence Mitchell has been a big fish in a small pond. Now, awesome to see him get this opportunity, because when he strikes, he lets it all hang out, and his head kicks are insane. So for Mitchell, at flyweight, I don't know how he made it at 5'10", and they had him on the Ultimate Fighter. 73 and 3/4 is the reach. He's still going to have that advantage at bantamweight. Even on short notice, he makes for an interesting
And the thing about Mitchell is, he's a tall fighter for all the great reasons we talk about tall fighters. But what's the one negative that we bring up? And you bring it up in that Kai France performance. His stance with his arms is a little bit out, and looping shots get around his guard quite often. Now, I know Kai isn't, all over the UFC. Like, he really is, maybe not a one-of-one, but an extremely talented striker. I do worry about how Mitchell's going to handle a lot of pressure, especially in this matchup, because if he does find himself leaning back a lot, Luke Rockhold kind of wrote the blueprint for this, It doesn't necessarily always work out well, and with Mitchell, I worry if he is worried about the takedown with his hands down, is that going to open up his striking defense that much more?
I don't think he's afraid of anything, because in his last walkout, he took on 4-1 Christian Alexander, and if you want to watch that fight, it's on the XXX-itis network. I felt disgusting for watching that on YouTube. He's walking out to cult of personality in these like he's Chick Magnet Punk. Wow. So good on Terrence Mitchell. But his last number of wins, if you go back down through it from the Ultimate Fighter to now, the last few, arm triangle, rear naked choke, he's got a DQ. The Justin Cook fight was a rear naked choke. And they're no hook rear naked choke wins, kind of similar to AJ Dobson when he was on his way into Contender Series and then the UFC. So if you do look at a matchup like this, Matt, Mitchell can flow through a lot of grappling positions. He has one giant advantage. Being that length and that height, you can get out of some of those sticky positions once you're down against the mat. But if you look at it, Saaiman is a pretty darn big favorite in the fight. We have a look over in Topology. The fans are crazy this week. Or they
really have it one side.
They're all in unison. I'm going to say over under 92.5% Cameron Saaiman. I'm testing them now.
I'm going to sound crazy, but over.
And it's under. Look at that. 850 total votes, 90% going with Cameron Saaiman. Large percentage of them going to win by knockout. For Mitchell, the 10% that have him to get the win, 38% by submission. And I think Cameron Saaiman can get a win in this matchup. But Terrence Mitchell is going to be tricky for a couple of reasons. Level competition on the regional scene, so bad. So bad. He was the 8th ranked flyweight on that season of the Ultimate Fighter. Brandon Moreno, number 16. So crazy to see that. But for Mitchell, since then, I've seen him add a little bit. You look at him training up there in Alaska with his brother, who's also a fighter, and one's got a little bit of the beard. One usually keeps it clean shaven. That's how I tell the difference between the two of them in their pictures. Maybe people have an issue with Matt and I sometimes that way, but Terrence Mitchell and his brother kind of look similar, like they're brothers or something. So I do like the long-range attacks of a guy like Terrence Mitchell too, especially in the first round. But for me, I like MSP to get the win in the fight.
If Terrence Mitchell fights like Cowboy Cerrone when he fought Eddie Alvarez, I think he can go out there and get a win. I think those check knees up the middle are going to be really important because they're going to allow him to create some of that distance so he can be effective with his striking. But the issue is, I kind of played my hand early, I do think the pressure of Saaiman, especially with the threat of the takedown, is going to be difficult for Mitchell to decipher because Saaiman has the ability to decide or to dictate, hey, we're fighting on the feet now, we're fighting on the ground now, and for that reason, I have Cameron.
Joseph Benavidez, after Terrence Mitchell lost the Kai Kara France, everybody in the locker room's really sad. It's the end of episode 1, and Joey B grabs the mic and he says this: "It's just the beginning." And for Terrence Mitchell, just the beginning. A big-time opportunity this weekend. Somebody listening in their car to the podcast just got freaked out. But both of us going with South Africa's Cameron Saaiman to get the win. Will his teammate Dricus du Plessis be able to get it done against Robert Whittaker later on the card? We're going to find out. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.